So echoey.
Perfect. Great. And of course, you grew up in Montreal,
Yeah,
but you came to Ottawa for university,
that's right.
and you went to Carleton.
Yeah.
And I just want to know, did Carleton help you become the successful politician you've become today?
Very much so, because the first time I ran for anything was president of the Residents Association, kind of raw River Residents Association, in 1982, and I got my first taste of politics and campaigns and so on, and I quite enjoyed it. And a lot of my friends that I met in residence, have become lifelong friends that have helped me in my various election campaigns, to the province and to city council. So, I got the political bug, I guess, in Carleton, and I think Carleton was very important when I ran the first time. I was, a bit of a nobody, no one knew who I was, and I was able to use Carleton as a bit of a base to build a campaign that got me elected to city council in 1991. So I've always been very close to the university. I served on the board of governors, was president of the Alumni Association, and always tried to do what I could to give back to the university that had, given me a very good education, but also gave me an opportunity to sort of experience what it was like to be a politician, albeit a student politician.
For sure, right. And you have a degree in communications from Carleton.
There it is, right there. My
Great.
wall.
Yeah. And so you're very familiar with the school, like you said. You were on the board of governors. So tell me, with this in mind, why should students at Carleton support you on October 27th?
Well, I think a couple of reasons. We've really tried to work closely with the universities to implement things like the UPass, which has been very successful. Later this year, we're going to implement a new upgrade of the O train, which is going to benefit Carleton students more than anyone else when the new trains come on service by the end of the year. And that will increase the frequency. Instead of every 15-minute service, every 9-minute service at peak time. So that's a big it's a big deal for students, because sometimes you just miss that train, you got to wait a full 15 minutes. That cuts it almost in half. I think we've tried to when the university was building their parking garage, they had some troubles, and we had to stop O train service. We coordinated that with the university, so I think we have a good relationship with the university, and I think I've worked very hard with the various student governments, CUSA and RAW, to make sure that they feel part of the city, because sometimes Carleton, because it's unlike Ottawa U, which is right downtown, sometimes they feel a little bit isolated. And we've tried to work closely with them to make sure that they feel they're an important part of the community.
Definitely. Great. And so definitely Ottawa has two very big universities. Maybe you couldn't say it's like the really university town like say Kingston is with Queen's, but definitely it offers a lot to students. So can you tell me like a little bit about what kind of services the city offers that makes the life of a student easier?
Yeah, I think things like transit is the biggest one, because obviously most students don't have a car, so they have to rely on transit. And I think with the O train, and then ultimately with the light rail that will connect at Bayview, the light rail station, and the O train tracks basically come into alignment there. Once light rail is built, you'll have a easier way to get from Carleton to Ottawa U and Ottawa U to Carleton, because there's often people taking courses at both schools.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a big benefit. The light rail system, which is under construction now, gets fully operational. I think things like what we're trying to do in cleaning up the Ottawa River is a big deal for everyone who's concerned about the environment. We have a 3-point plan to clean up the pollution and raw sewage going into the Ottawa River.
Okay.
I think the fact that we have a very progressive police service that works well with Carleton campus, and safety for students is another concern that we try to address through police and crime prevention measures. And I think the fact that we created Invest Ottawa, which is an economic development agency that is working hard to attract companies to come here and allow companies here to expand, is important to students, because students graduate, they're looking for a job.
For sure.
We want them to stay in Ottawa, and we know that the federal government is downsizing. So we're trying our best through our means of supporting Invest Ottawa to expand the high-tech sector, the tourism industry, the service industry.
Okay. You just mentioned about the 3-point plan of cleaning up the Ottawa River.
Yeah.
Would you mind talking a little bit about that? Like what are those 3 points?
It's more phases as opposed to points. So there have been 2 phases. We've almost completed 2 phases, which have regulated, lack of a better, more technical explanation, is regulating the water flow from catch basins going into the river. And we've reduced pollutants by about 70%, which is good, but we need to get the last 30%. So what happens in Ottawa now is there's a heavy rainfall. The treatment plant can't handle all the water, so the backup is that all that sewage and salts and stuff from the streets goes into the river. And so the 3rd phase is to create this series of underground cavernous tanks that would gather the water during a heavy rainfall, and then when the treatment plant has enough capacity, that water would then be pumped into the treatment plant, cleaned up, and sent back into the river clean, as opposed to polluted. So this 3rd phase, we're lobbying the provincial and federal governments to get the funding for it, which is $195 million. We would pay a third. The province is on board. Their budget included it, but it was defeated. And then we're trying to get the federal government to come on board. So that would be the final phase, building these underground tanks to store the water when there's a heavy rainfall. Because right now, when there's a heavy rainfall, all the pollutants from catch basins, throughout the city flow into the river.
It's pretty gross.
And then the beaches are closed.
Right.
So that's why you see beach closures after heavy rainfalls, because feces and everything else gets into the system. So it's important. The Ottawa River is important to the city. Obviously, it's where we are drinking water from.
Interesting. So one thing that came up, this is on a similar note, but one thing that came up in the Citizen this morning was the University of Ottawa. They were contracting out a private company to renovate an old seniors' home,
Right.
which they would turn into student housing. Obviously, that's a concern for both universities. So what's the city doing to help meet these concerns and needs of the universities for off-campus housing?
Yeah, we have an affordable housing program, but it tends to be for more for families who are living at or below the poverty line.
Right.
So the university takes the primary responsibility for providing housing. In Carleton's case, it's all on campus.
Right.
And in Ottawa U's case, it's a mix of on and off campus. So we don't have a specific role. Our role is to try to provide affordable housing for those people who are living in poverty, and that frees up other housing for students and other people who are not particularly well off to get an affordable place to live. So our housing prices tend to be pretty stable. It's Toronto is very expensive.
Right.
Vancouver is very expensive. We're in the middle of the pack, and so we've put $14 million a year into an affordable housing strategy that's building. We've built something like 500 or 600 units of affordable housing in this term of council. We've got a program of rent supplement, so if someone is about to be evicted from their apartment, they can apply for a rent supplement and stay in the apartment as long as they meet the criteria, which is basically they don't have a large income. But most of student housing is primarily the responsibility of the university. We don't build student housing ourselves.
Okay. So again, on the topic of students, obviously the universities can only house so many students, so many of them would live off campus, and would have to commute into campus. And many students ride bikes. It's a very green method of transportation. It's cheap. But every year there are tragedies where cyclists die. So I'm just wondering, what's the city doing to make roadways safer in general, but also for cyclists?
Yeah, it's an important issue, and it's one of the things that we've tried to do as a city. We've put a record amount of money into cycling initiatives this term of council, $24 million. And that's doing a number of things. We created the first downtown segregated bike lane in Ontario's history on Laurier Avenue. And I'd like to see those expanded to different parts of the city because it gives that buffer of protection for cyclists to separate them from cars. We've also instituted a number of connections, pathway connections, that before just sort of the bike path stopped and where did you go? There's nothing there. So we have if you go on our website, we have a whole series of construction projects that we're working on. We're paving a lot of shoulders so that people can, can drive along a road and have protection, not intermingling with the cars, but they're on a paved shoulder.
Okay.
So there's a large number of projects that we've worked on, and we still have more work to do. This year we're constructing a pedestrian and cycling bridge across the Rideau River from Somerset to Donald Street, which would connect sort of Sandy Hill to Overbrook Forums area in the East End. And we just opened last year the O-Train bike path, which is basically coming from Preston Street. So, every time we see a tragedy that took place, whether it's on Bronson Avenue or on Riverdale at Riverside where someone's lost their life, we know that we're on the right track to invest in making cycling safer. Today, as a matter of fact, the millionth rider will use the segregated bike lane.
Wow.
So we have a counter under the pavement that we track. So it probably happened earlier this morning, where 1 million people have used that segregated bike lane in 3 years, which is pretty remarkable. So it shows it was a good investment. There was some criticism that we did that because some parking was lost. But I think we're talking about people's lives, and we want to keep people safe, but we also want to encourage cycling. We have to provide safe environments for them to do that. So I'm proud of the fact that we've spent more than any council in Ottawa's history on cycling initiatives. And we actually were the only city in the province that has won a gold award as being a safe cycling community from Share the Road, which is a national organization
for bicycle
safety and
right.
investments in infrastructure.
Right. There was a quote from Rob Ford, this was a little while ago, but it implied that cyclists shouldn't be on the road with cars. I'm not sure if you remember that.
Yeah.
But so would you say that Ottawa and Toronto kind of contrast each other with their attitudes towards cyclists and road safety?
Well, I think, as mayors we contrast because, Mr. Ford has never been a big supporter of cycling initiatives, and I have been. I think, the more people that ride their bikes to work or to school, is one less car on the road, it's less pollution, and it's better for their health. I used to be the Minister of Health Promotion for the province of Ontario, and one of the things that we discovered is that we spend virtually all of our money in treating people with ailments and injuries and sickness as opposed to preventing it in the first place. And with an aging population, if we don't start getting people to take better care of themselves, the healthcare system is going to be so completely overwhelmed, it's going to cause tremendous problems for us. We spend only about 1% on prevention and promotion of health and 99% on basically treating sick people.
Right.
And I think, you see other European countries that spend a lot more on cycling and healthy eating programs and smoking cessation. and they're living longer, they're living better, and there's less strain on our healthcare system. So, cycling is not just about getting from point A to point B. It's also about improving our overall collective health as a society, so that when we really need the emergency ward, it's not going to be clogged with people who shouldn't be there in the first place if they've just taken some time to be more physically active, eat properly, watch their diet, and not smoke.
Sure. Now, you've been involved with both provincial and municipal politics.
Yeah.
So I kind of have to ask, do you prefer one or the other?
Yeah, I much prefer municipal politics, and not to say I didn't like my time at Queen's Park, but I find that at the municipal level, it's a much more pragmatic level of government. There's less talk about doing things, and there's more doing things. Provincially and federally, they tend to spend a lot of time talking about issues. At our level, it's a much more pragmatic level of government. We don't talk about housing, we build housing. We don't talk about a cycling strategy, we implement a cycling strategy. And I've had the benefit of being the mayor before and being the mayor now and being a provincial MPP and a cabinet minister. And I think I can be more effective at this level. And that's why, in many ways, I returned. And the other thing is that in the provincial and federal, you have a party system. So you're not always your own person. Here, I vote based on what I think is best for the community and the input I've received, as opposed to in Queen's Park or Parliament Hill, you have to, by and large, toe the party line.
Right. Great. So now, if you would mind to talk about the election a little bit.
Yep.
Obviously, that's coming up soon. So what issues do you see as being the most important in this election, and especially for students? Which ones would be most relevant that they should look into if they're going to vote for?
I think questioning candidates on their views on transit, where do they stand on phase 2 of light rail? Phase 1 is, just to recap, is the system we're building right now. So we're about 20% complete the tunnel, and it goes from Tunney's Pasture through the downtown under Queen Street, and then comes up at Ottawa U and heads east to Blair Road. So that's phase 1, and that's locked down with a fixed price contract. Construction's begun, it's on time and on budget. Phase 2 would see us at 35. That first phase is 13 kilometers, and it's $2.1 billion. So that's locked down, and it's going to be completed by the beginning of 2018. Phase 2, which our council just approved unanimously, is to have the light rail go farther west to Bayshore Shopping Centre and Algonquin College, and then farther east to Place d'Orléans. And then the O train would go farther south to Riverside South. So that second phase would be 35 kilometers more track on top of the 13. And it's a little under $3 billion in total to get that done. And if we get funding from the province and the federal government, it would share it a third. So it's about $975 million each level of government. We could start that construction in 2018. And it would go and be completed by 2023. Okay. So the great thing about that, it would then connect 3 of our post-secondary institutions together. So you're going, and again, there's a lot of people that take programs at Algonquin and Carleton, or Algonquin and Ottawa U, or Carleton and Ottawa U. And we would, you'd be able to go from Algonquin to Ottawa U on light rail, which would cut your trip, substantially.
Very much so.
And you could go to Carleton by taking the Algonquin line to Bayview and then transferring on the O train to Carleton. So it really would become an academic powerhouse where you'd have all of these institutions connected by rail, which allows much more freedom and flexibility for people to take courses from different institutions. So that's, I think, is going to be a big issue. For the candidates who are running, support carrying on with light rail. Because, there's some people that will say, well, we can't afford it, or it's too expensive. My view is we can't afford not to do it, because we're probably a couple of decades behind where we should be in building a proper mass transit system for our city. When you look at Montreal, Vancouver, Toronto, they're all ahead of us, obviously, with their mass transit systems. Calgary as well.
Are there any other issues you see as being really big in the campaign?
Yeah, I think the tax rate is important to everyone. Students pay property taxes in essence through their rent. They don't pay it directly to the city, but their landlords charge them rent, and part of the rent is property taxes. The previous council saw tax increases going up to almost 5%, which was well above the rate of inflation. So when I campaigned the last election, I said I wanted to keep the tax rate at or below 2.5%. And we've been able to accomplish that every year. And this year, our tax rate was the lowest in 7 years at 1.9%. So if we keep the tax rate low, it ensures that the rents that students are charging don't go up as much as they would if the tax rate went up 5% like the previous council. So that's an issue that students don't often think about because they don't pay their property taxes directly to the city. They pay it in essence through the rent they're charged by landlords.
Right. And just on the topic of the campaign again, in 2010 you were running against the incumbent mayor, Larry O'Brien, but this time you are the incumbent.
Right.
So tell me, how does that change the dynamic of the campaign?
Well, you become, you have to defend what you've done as mayor, and I've always said in politics, you either run on your record or you run from your record. And I'm going to run on my record because I think we've had a very good 4 years. I think a lot of people are seeing what's going on in Toronto and, saying to me and my colleagues, thank goodness there's some stability in the city of Ottawa, because I think that's been such a distraction. And, our council has worked well together as a team, which is important. And I think, we set out a series of objectives that we want to accomplish, or we wanted to accomplish at the beginning of the term. And we've met those objectives. We kept the tax rate reasonable. We brought in a light rail plan, brought in a river action plan.
I always have the honor of saying, Mr. Mayor,
Oh, I know,
we
Courtney
need to
said
wrap up
me.
in 5 minutes.
All right, thanks.
Sorry, Aggie, it wasn't special treatment for that.
So, we brought in a very clear plan, what we wanted to do with the city on transit, on economic development, on the environment, on arts, and we've stuck to the plan. And, I think we've provided good, solid, predictable government, and, we've, as I said, we'll be judged on our record.
Right. So just as one final question, is there anything else that you think students and just voters in general should know about what you're running for the university?
Well, I think that, I've always, in my elections, tried to encourage students to get involved in the political process, because, I often will go in and speak to students in high schools or elementary schools and tell them, most of the attention in politics is directed to up the street on Parliament Hill. But the reality is that the city of Ottawa, your municipal government, touches you much more frequently than the federal government does. And I use the example, when you wake up in the morning, your alarm clock goes off. That's powered by Hydro Ottawa, which is a city service. And you turn your tap on to brush your teeth, that's water provided by the city. You flush the toilet, that's city service. You walk on a sidewalk that's been plowed, that's a city service. You get on a bus, that's a city service. And you can go through, an entire day and have, contact with city facilities and services, and you don't even think about it because the water works, the sidewalk's plowed, the bus comes. So, I've always tried to encourage young people to get involved in the political process, to volunteer on a campaign, to help out. And, when I had my launch at the RA Center a couple of weeks ago, I think half the room were people under 25, which is great, because we want to try to encourage the next generation of people to, have a say, but get involved in the political process. So my advice is, look at the candidates that are running, whether it's for mayor or city councillor, and go to their websites, see if you agree with what they've done in their career and what they're promising to do as a platform, and get involved in the political process. It's not always glamorous work. You're putting up signs or dropping off leaflets or stuff like that. But people who are studying journalism or political science or public administration, this is a great way to figure out, are you interested in politics or in public service or in government?
Great. Well, thank you so much for the interview.
Yeah,
I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much. Nice to see you. And I know your dad, and I know